Hello and welcome to another anime lore and theory video. I'm Shergok, your host, and today we are going to take a closer look at dragons and dwarves, two very unlikely roommates to say the absolute least. But before we're going to take a closer look at any of this, let me quickly thank my patrons for supporting this channel, as well as say thanks to all users of the YouTube thanks function for making one-time donations. And with that said, let's get to the topic at hand. And again, today I want to talk about a fantasy cliché that I find extremely unrealistic, the idea that dragons occupy dwarven fortresses, and just regular dwarven homes, because regular dragons, assuming flying, fire-breathing magic lizards, can be considered normal or regular, and especially classical D&D dragons or even just wyverns would have enormous problems, even just getting into dwarven fortresses. And I know what you're thinking. Of course dragons can't take over dwarven fortresses because dragons don't exist and dwarves do live in forests and help young girls dealing with their mother-in-law. So what's the point? Well, even in fantasy worlds, it would be extremely difficult for dragons to conquer dwarven dwellings, let alone hold a classical dwarven fortress, because either the largest entrances are surrounded by equally large gates that a dragon couldn't just easily pass through, and of course those gates would obviously be guarded by all sorts of ballistae, onagas, trebuchets, and of course cannons and muzzle-loaded rifles, because they are simply the most obvious points of attacks. But even if, for some reason, the dwarves didn't build their fortress solely to dwarven scale, but to dragon scale, dwarven architecture is still famous for being sturdy, solid, and most importantly, well thought out. So the dragon, even if the interior is very spacey, wouldn't likely get in. Because if medieval humans designed towers so that right-handed defenders had a actual advantage over right-handed attackers due to the layout of the corridors and stairs, then dwarves could easily have a large entrance gate, where even giants could enter and trade, only to design that grand entrance hall as a dead end. And the only thing that would lead deep into the dwarven fortress would be many small, dwarf-sized tunnels, and this way the dwarves could trade in the courtyard even with giants, but retreat deep into the fortress if humans, elves, or draconic enemies manages to breach the gate. And this forecourt would probably also be located far down in the valley, so that the dwarves could defend themselves better and have the upward advantage, the advantage of the high ground. And merchants wouldn't have to climb far up the mountains to trade. And of course this also means that their tunnels couldn't be flooded. So bad luck, Tywin Lannister. And this simple design alone would completely lock out dragons, because there would be no dragon-friendly entrance. And even if the dragon were content with just occupying the courtyard, the dwarves could appear from hidden tunnels at various points, open fire and retreat before the sluggish dragon could even react. And it turns into a game of whack-a-mole. And on the other hand, one must ask, what would a dragon even want in a dwarven fortress? Because dragons are flying flamethrowers, whose combat style resembles dive bombers, and on the ground, they lose one of their greatest advantages, being out of reach of swords, axes, and most projectile weapons, due to their height and their speed. And while dragons might at least benefit from the fact that narrow corridors limit troop movement of the enemy as well, and force enemies to run straight into their flame because the corridor is a straight corridor and leads directly to the dragon's maw. But still it would be very cramped. And wyverns would also be at a great disadvantage, because perhaps even at a greater disadvantage, because they can't either breathe fire or produce much less of it. And they could also be attacked from both sides in the tunnel, unable to even turn around in the narrow space. And even if a dragon somehow manages to capture a dwarven fortress and drive the dwarves out, which would be a feat indeed, the other dwarven strongholds probably wouldn't let this insult to their people slide. And all the owners of the occupied fortress would need to do is promise honor, glory, and free beer, and the dragon would experience a reverse Pearl Harbor in the tunnels and caves, which the dwarves know inside and out, since they built them, and since they have lived there for literal millennia, and fit perfectly into the narrow passages, the dragon wouldn't be able to fly, but be attacked and harassed from all sides by an enemy that he would have a hard time even detecting. And especially if the dwarves have explosives, say black powder, it would be a nightmare for the scaly flesh and blood problem. After all, a dragon can't do much if an entire tunnel collapses and buries it alive, because in the end, the mountain is stronger. And I think the dwarves would rather destroy their own home than see it occupied by an enemy. And the dragon would eventually need to eat. So in other words, blowing up the access point a mile before the exit would be enough to simply starve the dragon out. And besides, dwarves are notoriously stubborn and would relentlessly attempt to eliminate the dragon to reclaim the birthplace of their ancestors. So it would be a never-ending war for the dragon. Also, when the dragon flies off, the dwarves could simply blow up the entrance or seal it off in some other way to prevent the dragon from re-entering the fortress. And they could do this every single time. So in other words, even if plan A and plan B fail, plan Y would probably work at the latest. And if not, there's still plan Z. That would be to simply go to the nearest human city and say, hey, whoever drives the dragon out of our home gets the treasure. We just want our property back. And then every human adventurer in the surrounding lands would try to turn the dragon into exotic designer fashion, Monster Hunter style. And if all that still doesn't help, the dwarves could just ask the elves, who likely can speak and communicate with the dragons, to negotiate. But that would also be pretty unrealistic. I mean, such a conversation would be difficult because of the hostility, of all of the bloodshed, the suffering, and the deep mutual resentment at that point. And then the elves would still have to talk to the actual dragon. Finally, here's another question that I think is asked far too rarely. What would a dragon even want in a Dwarven Fortress? Aside from serving as an enemy in D&D campaigns and video games, all those tunnels would be a perfect hiding place for goblins, skaven, trolls, ogres, snakes, and anything else that likes biting into dragon eggs or dragon balls. And as I said, the tunnels are narrow, damp, and simply not built to accommodate a creature the size of a dragon. And sure, narrow is a flexible term, especially when you're a magical creature that could potentially reshape the fortress with earth magic. But why not just settle somewhere that only dragons can reach and without a permanent enemy at the doorstep? Like literally. Somewhere without an established bearded and grumpy population of blacksmiths, mechanics, and weapon enthusiasts ready to challenge your claim over the territory, again and again, day in and day out. Plus, since dragons don't have pockets, hoarding gold is relatively useless for them. They can't really use it as a currency, and even if a dragon were to fly into the nearest city with a mouthful of gold to shop, the rest of its treasure would remain unguarded. In other words, dragons would likely have very little interest in permanently living in a dwarven fortress. Okay, and now it's your turn. What do you think of my assessment of the dwarven fortresses and why dragons wouldn't actually want to live there, or even get inside without significant effort? And with that said, I will hand it to you. What do you think about dragons wanting to occupy dwarven fortresses for whatever reason? And how realistic do you even find the idea? Let me know it down in the comments. And while you're typing, please check out my German channel, my fantasy channel, and if you don't want to listen to my voice or accent, but are still interested in the things I have to say, I have made an AI channel, narrated by almost a woman, where I use AI voiceovers for my videos. And the channels are all linked down in the video description. Also, please check out my Patreon if you want to support me beyond just leaving a like or sub. And with that said, I say thank you very much for watching, thanks to my Patreons for supporting this channel, and as usual, special thanks to Order Daddy Order, ASK, Bad Girl Yee, Bad Burrito 316, Beezer, Ben C, Brandon S, Brandon D, Chrissy, Crowley 0221, Sia, Crystal Prime, Dead Slime, Death is Mercy, Deathless Dragonlord, Demon Xenomorph 1987, Devin Downen, Ding Dong, Din Pep, Dragonlord Placido Saxophone, Duckwagon, Dunkler Krieger, Dystopia, Dystopia II, Enigmatic Unicorn, Feralchivan, Guy with That Head, Hector Marino, Hoss, Huster, Jacob G, Jana B, Jason, J. Morris, Chromius, Kyle R, Lee K. Long, Legendarius, Le Louche Britannia Viffy Mustache, Lexus Fox, Lord Nishikian Rai, Lord Touch Me, Lofrazer, Merovec, Mr. Shoes, Mr. Tweaker, Michael R, Michael Y, Nope, Oh Hell No, Normal Toad, Oh Kill, Overlord General Gasper, Paddy Pentum, Personage, Ruru, Primus 11, Rhinomere, Q&A Caracos P, Shergox's Daddy, Shadow Lightning Wolf, Shrine Keeper, Sir Axolotl, Super Tier Magic Batista Bomb, Supreme Cheese, Staris, Ted, Texas Deer, The Orc Warboss, Rocket Smasher, T.E. Vang, Vash Hawkeye, Vegito27, Venture Fanatic, Wilhelm, Xenokai, and Sonagon. Thanks guys. Anyway, have a nice day, and I hope to see you all again soon on my next video.